Oh, it's on? And now two guys who survived being attacked by a Swedish bachelorette party, Aaron and Jonathan.
Howdy, and welcome to episode 96 of In the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. In this episode, some new thoughts on guns, and we play with our tinfoil hats. We're your hosts, Aaron
and Jonathan.
And you are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. Whether you're already a crack shot or have never taken a bit of instruction in your life, we could all become better marksmen. Join the volunteers at Project Appleseed for a day or even a weekend of rifle instruction that is second to none. Find out where marksmanship meets history by connecting with the good folks at appleseedinfo.org or click on the 3 Strikes of the Match banner under the We Support heading in the right-hand column of In the Rabbit Hole. Remember, your rifle isn't going to shoot itself. So impress your friends, impress your neighbors the next time you're at the range. And don't miss out on the chance to shoot for free and earn your rifleman's patch today. Okay, so I'm trying new positions today.
Yeah, and you flipped the lever. That's just weird. New positions, lever flipped. It's just getting kinky in here.
It is. I'm telling you. New microphone. Now I can actually see the screen instead of having this giant, because I do have this oddly massive microphone. I don't think that's a euphemism for anything. But,
you're trying to keep your microphone, the microphone, out of your face.
I am. So I kind of have it up and to the side. So if I sound a little off today, or if I get a little quiet, my apologies. I'm trying out something new. Keeping it exciting around here, which brings me to the point of we're going to have kind of a free-form show today. We've got a bunch of things that we want to talk about. And of course, since we have this new hour-long format, we get to talk about all kinds of stuff, including something we actually never do, which is really talk about tinfoil hat stuff. And today, we are going to play around with our tinfoil hats just a little bit, just enough to get you excited. But don't worry, back down to earth as we're done. So where are we going to start this today? I mean, there's so much stuff. We are going to talk about guns. This is going to be the gun show, but we're going to come at it, since everybody else is talking about what's happening to your gun rights and everything else, it would be kind of silly for us to jump in and talk about it too, because there are so many great resources out there that honestly pay much closer attention to what's going on with the gun laws than either I do or, well, actually, Jonathan, you pay more attention than I do. But I think...
I follow it, but just more from a... because it impacts us all.
Yes. And I figure if something... I'm using a bit of the Tim Ferriss method, and I kind of see it as, I know you're watching it, and so I figure if something blows up, I'm going to get a text message, Skype message, email, pigeon with the homing pigeon. That was the word I was... Something.
Yes,
Something that
and if you see the code word blue, you know what to do.
Is blue the code word? I thought...
No, but I'm using that for our code word for the show. We don't want others to know.
Right. Because we were using fuchsia before. Now it's blue.
If I were to use blue, then I wouldn't tell everybody.
So I think let's pick a spot and get started. Why
don't we? You mentioned we're following it, or you're following it sort of. I'm following it a little bit better.
I'm following it through you, really.
We could always start with a little bit of that, flow into how we think it impacts people.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
I think that sounds good. So I think the primary way that I'm tracking what's going on, and by and large what I do is I go on and I just read headlines, and if something really stands out to me, then I'll actually stop and read or skim the article, depending on how interesting I actually think it is, or how much information is being presented. So I usually hit the truth about guns. I don't like every single article they put out. I don't agree with every single thing they say, but I actually, for the most part, I really do like their site. I'm really confused about that guy that's nicknamed the Rabbi, or Rabbi.
He's a rabbi.
Is he a rabbi?
Yeah.
He doesn't really have the beard for it.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I'm a little
part, but he either is or is just their Jewish friend. One or the other.
Okay, all right. Maybe we should have an all Jew panel one day, like the two of us, him, and I don't know, find another Jew that likes.
We should try that.
We should try that.
We should definitely try that. I like their site also. I use it a lot. They tend to be pretty good at staying on top of things. If I want to use the Chris Ferris type method, I actually use them to notify me. The site works out pretty well. Some of their formats are a little weird for me as well. I get what they're doing. It makes sense. I like their site a lot. They tend to be pretty well balanced as long as you avoid the comments, but I think that's pretty true throughout the whole internet.
I think that's a rule on the internet. Do not read the comments. And we were having that personal discussion the other day about
definitely. You read the comments, you start realizing just how crazy everyone is.
At least the people that are willing to comment on the internet.
Yeah, exactly. Another source that I really like, and I've talked about them multiple times, is Reason.com. So while they are not exclusively covering the gun issues, they actually do cover some pretty good articles, including, how we came to be in a country that has defined things that are not real, like assault weapons, since there is no such thing, or, it's a relatively new concept to have an assault weapon, quote unquote. They've got whole articles around that, whole articles on what it really means for the Second Amendment. Very, in my mind, unbiased, very focused on the literal translations of, why it is or is not constitutional. They're pretty good at stuff like that. And every now and then they've got some humor behind it too. So I like Reason.com for following a lot of these things. And
to clarify a little bit about assault weapon, I mean, the military does have a definition. And you'd think the commander-in-chief, being the commander-in-chief of the military, if he's going to use the phrase assault weapon, he might actually go look up what the military definition is, since we're calling it military-style weapons. And then he would realize that what he keeps talking about as an assault weapon is in no way an assault weapon. It's a lot like if you took a Corvette body and put it on a Volkswagen chassis, calling that a Corvette. Or calling that a Corvette-style vehicle. Not exactly, kids. But what is it, and you've been following it more closely. Have you found anything else that has actually been keeping up with the news about what's going on with these shenanigans, or any other resources?
It's been pretty stagnant. I mean, like all things politician, it makes a big splash, and they like to talk a lot about what they're doing to save all of us. And then it kind of dies down a little bit once the fervor goes down. And I think you really just have the fringe elements talking mostly now. But there is the big Dianne Feinstein bill that is the giant size assault weapon ban / screw all current gun owners / magazine capacity / background checks / everything. Basically throw in the kitchen sink and you've got everything they could ever want. And it's pretty nasty. I mean, it really does do a lot of things to limit. It grandfathers some guns. It talks about hunting guns versus non-hunting and sporting guns. But the reality of it is the way they've defined assault weapons. And again, the military may have some definitions of what a battle rifle is or an assault rifle or all these other concepts, but that's not the definition that these groups use. And actually, assault weapon in general wasn't a term that didn't even exist. It didn't exist until the late 80s. And it was the anti-gun movement that actually created the term. All guns, by the way, were designed to kill. So I think you and I would both agree, there's no such thing as a gun that wasn't designed for originally. So there are target guns that aren't very good at it, but there was no weapon that wasn't originally designed to kill, and to kill efficiently and effectively. That is the purpose of a gun. That has always been the purpose of a gun. That doesn't mean it can't be used for sporting. Doesn't mean it can't be used for hunting. But originally, they were designed as weapons of war. We can argue that all day long, but that's just reality, and that's okay. Bows and arrows were originally designed as weapons of feeding in war as well. And so were spears, and so were knives, and all those other tools. They're weapons for hunting, killing, and war. So, these bills that end up trying to protect us from ourselves are just plain silly.
Well, I guess since you've been watching it a lot more closely than I have, and not to go into depth with it, but I guess what are some of the highlights that you've come across? Because I didn't know about the proposed ammo constriction that you told me about right before the show.
So there's a bunch. There's a ton of bills out there, by the way. It's not just the Feinstein bill. there's a bill that's going through. That obviously, it's when I say going through, bear in mind bills have different stages. I'm not going to try to explain how bills go through Congress or anything, but if you're interested, there's a little cartoon that you probably saw in grade school that I think was called "How a Bill Gets Through Congress," and it was Bill the Bill. But there is a bill that's kind of in the early stages to ban all internet sales of ammunition. There is a bill to ban or limit magazine capacities, and they're all over the place. So some of them are at 10. Many of you saw that New York lowered it to 7. Somewhere in between, I'm sure there's a bill for every number you can come up with. There are bills that talk about how you define an assault weapon. So the biggest thing is, in the original assault weapon ban that happened in the 90s, you had to have a certain number of characteristics in order to be defined as an assault weapon. Now it's any one characteristic. So, for instance, a quad rail would make something an assault weapon. A flash hider would make something an assault weapon. A threaded barrel would make something an assault weapon. So, by the way, every 22 that I may or may not own is an assault weapon based on these new definitions, because all my 22s have threaded barrels. A detachable magazine, by the way, which I thought was really interesting, a detachable magazine can make something an assault weapon. And again, it's about how you interpret some of these laws, but they can be interpreted that way in the Feinstein bill. A detachable magazine makes it an assault weapon, which means most of you who own handguns that aren't revolvers now own, or under this bill, will own an assault weapon. So it's kind of interesting. But the internet ammo sale is one that's really interesting because it's not being paid attention to. And it could have potential real impact on long-term ammunition prices and availability.
And it's one that, while I'm going to say I don't know anything about the bill, because I haven't read it, and I didn't know about it until roughly about 10 minutes ago, I think the real danger of it is that no one is talking about it. And it's one of those that's an easy sell to people that are kind of, they're okay with the Second Amendment, but at the same time, they're like, well, maybe we should have some limits. And the way they'll sell it is, well, you don't want a guy going online and being able to buy 5,000 rounds at one point, because, of course, the answer to the argument all of these morons make is, well, who needs that much? Well, I got to tell you, I'm not going to say how much 22 I keep on hand, but I keep a lot of it's enough 22 that if for some stupid reason I showed up in the news tomorrow and they mentioned how much ammo I had and they only counted 22, I would very easily sound like a raging lunatic to anyone who does not shoot competitively or does not shoot regularly. And to those people, they might say, okay, well, he had a lot, but it made perfect sense. But to the general public, it wouldn't.
Yeah, that's the scary part of it, right? It's like all of a sudden saying, oh, well, just because he wants to buy a case of ammunition or a case of 22, he must be crazy. Well, those of us who buy cases of ammunition, and Aaron, you and I are both participants in this game. It's all about price, and we do it in order to avoid these to basically balance these crazy fluctuations that occur. If we knew that there was never going to be a discussion of another ammunition ban or magazine capacity thing or any of these problems, if we could know that and guarantee it, I wouldn't care about keeping much smaller quantities in stock, because 22 would probably still be 1 to 2 cents a round. 9mm would cost maybe 6 to 10 cents at the most a round. And, we'd be living back 20 years ago.
Or even 5 years ago, before there was any of this stuff. Before Obama became elected, and that was the first ammo shortage in a long time that happened, was right after he got elected.
And even then, ammunition was a little higher. But my point is, if people never had these kinds of concerns and you never saw fluctuations like these, then I wouldn't think about buying ammo necessarily by the case. I might, just because we actually, a Sunday at the range can mean 500 rounds of 22.
Well, yeah, for you and I, it's become about price, and it's in large part become about, we're preppers, so we store, obviously.
Right.
But it's also become about convenience. It is much easier for me to just go buy a case of 22. A case, for those that don't know, of 22 is about 5,000 rounds. It's much easier for me to just buy that and be done with it and know, okay, every time I go to the range, I'll blow off about 500 rounds. So 5,000, all right, that's 10 times going to the range. I don't have to think about stopping and getting a box of ammunition or anything else. It's there, it's available, and I have it. And if something really does go wrong, and there's no more 22 tomorrow, then I've got plenty of it.
Exactly. And I do the same thing with any of my sporting rounds. And notice I say sporting rounds because for me, almost all of them at this point in time are sporting rounds. I mean, I know you're the same way. It's not like we're out there defending the nation today. So anything we buy right now is used as a sporting round until it's not.
Exactly. I think the only round I would say that I keep that I would not necessarily call my sporting round, although I have used it in a sporting fashion when I practice, is the round that for the handgun that I carry every day, because that is my defensive ammo. That is my defensive round.
Yep. And I, for my defensive handgun, I do keep specifically defensive ammunition around for that as well. But I think, one of the ways we've managed to equalize cost is by doing that, buying in bulk over time. And that's something I would recommend to anyone. So if you are somebody who is a Pro 2Aer, and I assume just about everyone listening to the show probably is, and you practice, which is something we talk about all the time, don't own them if you're not going to practice with them. Do the practice, buy it in some, I'm not telling you to go buy 5,000 rounds at a time or anything like that, but if you buy over time in slightly higher quantities, then even when you do have to buy, or when you feel like you have to buy in situations like now, when you take the average per round price of everything you own, it's much lower and you don't necessarily have to feel as bad about it.
And, that's true for ammo. That's really true for everything. And here's a funny one. And I know I've mentioned it on the show before because it is so funny, but that's how I buy my toilet paper.
Yeah.
And there's two reasons. One, I buy toilet paper. If I could get away with buying it by the pallet, the shipping pallet, I would. But as it is now, like I'll use the Amazon Subscribe and Save, which I have to buy a great big thing of toilet paper. But as a prepper, then I have lots of toilet paper on hand and the good stuff on hand. If the world comes, all unwound tomorrow, I'm good on toilet paper.
Yeah. Well, and I'm not sure they care if they get our endorsement or not, but I would agree. Amazon Subscribe and Save, by the way, people. If you're prepping and you're looking for an easier way to do it, Subscribe and Save is a fantastic way to plan out your prep.
And you do save money. If you have a Prime account on Amazon, you do save money that way. I pay a lot less for the toilet paper I buy by buying it in bulk and buying it through Subscribe and Save. And it's a lot easier because, like, if you try to buy it from Costco or someplace like that, it's always like the weird off-brand at Costco, and you show up and you never know if they're going to have it or not. And with the Subscribe and Save, what you do is you literally subscribe to a product, and you can say, I want this delivered every month. I want this delivered every 2 months. I want 3 months, 6 months, or I want it every 9 months. And they may or may not have one for every year. But I've done that with batteries. I've done that with toilet paper, paper towels, anything that I consider as a prepper. This is the kind of stuff that I'm going to use anyway. I can save money on. And as, in the longer term concept of prep, if things go sideways, then I've got this, whatever it is, for supply for 3 years or 10 years or however long I feel the need to stock up for.
If they sold ammunition, I'd subscribe and save to that.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that goes back to also going back to the ammo for a second. The other funny thing I've heard is nonstop people talking about they can't find an AR or they can't find ammo. And I'm really quite confused by these people. Yeah, if all you're doing is showing up to your local sporting goods store, then you're probably going to have a real problem finding ammunition unless you're going for the calibers that are really strictly considered hunting calibers, like 243 or 30-06, or 12 gauge or 20 gauge. And so it just cracks me up because I see these people and I'm just like, how do you not know there's this new thing called the internet where you can go search it out? And there are sites like, I know you and I both use sgammo.com, and that's not necessarily an endorsement and they're not an advertiser. I really like their website. And one of the reasons I really like their website is because they were clever enough for a very long time now to actually put a notify me when back in stock option on their website. And I'll go on. And even if it's something that I'm like, they have it in stock, but I don't really want to buy it today, I'll kind of keep an eye on it. And when it does go back out of stock, I'll sign up to be re-notified that it's back in stock again, because I know at some point that is something that I probably will want to purchase, like 40 caliber, because I don't really use 40 caliber, but I keep thinking, well, maybe a case of 40 cal might be nice. So I keep signing up for that and kicking around whether or not I want a case of it.
Well, the nice part about that notify me thing is it really does come out as soon as it's available.
Yeah.
And these days, stuff goes quickly. But the nice part is if you're on your email, you can very quickly get to the site, place your order. They're accurate. I know initially they had some problems because of the volumes and keeping up with their inventory and knowing exactly when they ran out. But they've gotten much better. I've never placed an order and then gotten an email saying, sorry, we screwed up. You can't get that.
Yeah, and I think they're a family-owned business. So, but I've always had a good experience buying from them. So that's just me personally. That's who I use. I also use Ammo to Go.
Yep.
I don't like their website as much because they lack that notify me feature. But it's still a nice site, and I still like doing business with them. I've always had a good experience, and I think you even actually talked to the owner of that site one day.
Yeah, I've even been to their physical shop.
Oh, have you? I didn't know that.
Nice people.
Yeah.
They're actually Ammo to Go is here in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
I think SG Ammo is in Oklahoma, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, they're in Oklahoma.
So these are all, and they are all family-owned businesses. These are local guys who started websites and doing right by their families.
Yeah, and honestly, their prices are both sites. And, most of those better known like family-owned sites, the prices are pretty reasonable. They're going to be a little elevated, but that's the times we live in right now, and I think that's also something that we're going to talk about in just a bit.
Well, I think their costs are slightly elevated too, so it's not in any way anything unusual. So these guys are just making their money like everybody else.
Yeah, and I think I'm sure there's a lot of good sites out there, and but like those are the two that we use. And you also use ammoseek.com to look stuff
up. I do. I've only started using that more recently because sometimes it is harder to find a specific type of ammo. And overall, I've preached it before on the show, but mostly I'm into very standardized ammunition: 9mm, 5.56, 308. Pretty standard stuff. I know, Aaron, you're generally the same way. I may have a slightly different view of it these days, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But when I want to find something for, say, I have a 44 mag revolver. And while 44 mag is not impossible to find right now, I do like to price search. And AmmoSeek is a really good site for allowing you to do some price searching, seeing who has what in stock. And it stays pretty good and up to date. It's not necessarily real time, but it does stay up to date well.
Yeah, another one is Ammo Engine, which I didn't even know about AmmoSeek. You've totally been holding out on me with that one.
I thought I'd told you about that one, but hey.
You might have.
Lots of stuff going on.
Exactly. I also use Ammo Engine from time to time. I don't like them as much, but now that I've seen AmmoSeek, I'm like, this is so much better. It's so much easier to navigate. The other thing that I'll do is once a day while I'm having breakfast, I'll go on to some of my favorite ammo websites and I'll just go shop. Even if I'm not in the mood to buy something, well, let's face it, I'm always in the mood to buy ammo. But if I'm not necessarily ready to buy ammo, I just go on and look, just what's moving, what's not moving, and that speaks to something that you were hinting at a minute ago, that we are going to come to a point about that in just a bit, about like calibers and stuff like that, and some of the trends we've noticed, and perhaps a different perspective of how to choose calibers and ammunition going forward. But another one I'd like to throw out is Primary Arms. Those guys those guys are in Houston. I've dealt with them directly. Really nice guys. And they took care of a transfer for me recently. And again, like, none of these are advertisements. These are all just like, personally, these are places we've gone, things we've done, we've used them, we liked them. I really like the guys at Primary Arms. And if you sign up for their newsletter, they've been doing a thing for their better customers that if you sign up for their newsletter, they won't put like PMags and stuff on their website, but if you're on their newsletter, they'll let you know. But be aware, and this was kind of an interesting thing, going back to stuff selling out. While I was in there and I was talking to him, because an old friend of ours was telling me that they had got in like 700 PMags, and he's like, they sold out, and this is just to their mailing list. They sold out of PMags in 12 minutes.
That's just crazy.
700 PMags in 12 minutes. And that's limiting. Like they were just like they were selling them at the pre-hysteria price, like the original. What is it, like $12 or $13 per magazine? But they were limiting it at like 2 per person. And I was like, because I asked, and I was like, well, when do you get them in again? And can I just buy 100 of them from you right now? And he looked at me and he's like, I know what you're saying, and I know what you're going to do, and no, you may not. But that, to stop for just a second, which is something else that I've been hearing people talk about recently, is people, really angry about people. They're AR-15 prices have doubled and ammo prices through the roof, and these people are just profiteering. And, cheaper than Dart.com, who we hate anyway. Well, I hate this. No, we hate. Is selling, run-of-the-mill steel AR-15 magazines for $127. And people are just getting red in the face about this. And it strikes me as funny because these are the same people that, if you bring up a conversation about anything to do with limiting capitalism, they will be pounding their fist red in the face. Well, this is capitalist society, and we're here, and it's okay to make money. You know what? This is one of the lesser pleasant parts of capitalism, is when demand goes through the roof and supply cannot catch up. Guess what happens? Price goes through the roof. And
by the way, just to add to that, as consumers, the price will only go as high as the market's willing to bear. Yeah,
that was another point I was going to make, and it was like, The Truth About Guns did a whole thing about when Cheaper Than Dirt did the $127 AR-15 magazines, and they were really mad about it. And I think that was actually the only article that they've written recently that I was like, yes and no, but not really. But it was that they were, this is ridiculous, and I'm like, you know what? If people don't buy those magazines at $127, they're going to be sitting on a ton of them. That price is going to drop pretty fast. Until they get to a price where people start buying at a rate that company is comfortable selling them at. And it was, somebody was asking me about it the other day, and a lot of this came up because I was actually having a conversation with someone about it. But it was that, if I had 8, I'm not saying I I'm not telling you how many I have, but if I had 8 AR-15 magazines right now, like PMags in particular, since those are the big one that everybody's crazy about right now. If I had 8, I would not sell them to anyone for what I paid for them. I wouldn't sell them to anyone for double what I paid for them, because at this point, I have no idea if those are going to be around anymore. And so if somebody offered me $50 for them, I'd be like, a piece. I'd be like, nah, not really. I'm going to hang on to them. If we got to about $100, I might start thinking about, well, I might be willing to part with 4. If somebody came up to me and said $500 a magazine, I'd be like, here you go. Here's 4.
Exactly.
I have my limits. I'd like to, if I was going to sell off half, I would be, keep half. But again, that's, what, as you were saying earlier in the production part of before we started recording, which was, it's, what is the replacement cost of this to me?
Yeah, that's one of the things. I mean, if you're a business, and by the way, I'm not defending Cheaper Than Dirt. I think personally, I have gotten myself off their newsletter and I won't buy from them anymore, but it has nothing to do with their prices. It has to do with their stance on guns in general. So, and I'm not going to discuss any more of that. But as far as price of anything goes, if I'm selling you something, then it's not really about what it cost me to buy. It's really about what it's going to cost me to restock and replace. And if there is no capability of restocking and replacing, the value can go up pretty significantly. Because I know that you don't have somewhere else to get it either. So it's all about, and then of course it goes to what the market will bear. And you're always going to have people who are going to be able to push those limits. And if there's customers who will pay $127 for a 30-round metal AR mag, well then, more power to the guy who charged it to him.
And the guy that bought it, because evidently he had the funds to do it.
Yeah, and you know what? We can all say, and I'd probably be one of the people going, that guy's an idiot. and he is, but again, hey, if he was willing to pay it and somebody was willing to sell it at that price, then everybody walks away happy, and that's how markets work.
And I think this also speaks to like what we were talking about, buying large quantities of whatever it is we wanted over long periods of time and avoiding these peaks. Is the funny thing about that, you and I've both had friends come to us and say, I think that 2 days after the Sandy Hook shooting, I had a friend, and it was basically like everybody knew, all right, something is coming down the pipe. Our Second Amendment rights are probably going to get hammered. I had a friend like text me and he was like, all right, I've got, I think it was like $1,200 or something. I've got $1,200 to spend on an AR. What should I buy? Why is that funny? It's funny because he has been mulling over whether or not he was going to purchase an AR for 5 years, maybe even 8.
But he got serious about it at the last price jump when we had the first term of Obama. And now all of a sudden he's serious about it again during the next price bump. And we like this guy a lot. He's a great guy.
And he's actually incredibly intelligent. He's just like most people doing goofy, thinking about it in a very goofy way. Well,
and it's prep in general. So, a lot of stuff we're talking about in this show applies to just about anything. If there was a great toilet paper shortage, our mass purchase of toilet paper would be
king.
The same discussion. But, with guns and ammunition and everything else, when you get to a point where the price is where you're comfortable paying that price and you want something, if you want product A or need product A and the price gets to a point where you're comfortable for it, don't keep waiting till it goes down because you're going to get some great deal. It doesn't ever work that way. Or in rare occasion, it might work that way. And then you stumble across it. It's not something you're waiting for usually. The reality of it is like all things in prep, it's all about doing things for stretches of time and preparing. And if you have been buying ammunition over long periods of time for your guns so you can practice and you can defend and all those things, then you're probably fine right now. You might still be lamenting because you're wondering what's going to happen tomorrow. But at the same time, you're probably okay right now. And like I said, it's all about averages and costs over time, not about the cost you paid today. But I think it's the same thing with an AR. If you've been mulling over an AR for the last 5 years and you didn't do it in the many chances you had till now, maybe the AR is just not the weapon for you. I mean, and it's funny, Aaron, I've mentioned on the show many times, the gun that I've been drooling over and thinking about has actually not changed in price very much at all. Maybe it is up a little bit. I doubt it though. I am still looking for some kind of a Winchester, either model 92 or 94 in either 44 Magnum or 30-30. I have been thinking about it for a very long time. I just haven't done it yet. And the reason I haven't done it has nothing to do with the price. It actually has to do with the fact that I'm just not sure if it's something I really need. And I hate buying things that in the long run just sit in a closet going unused, or in a safe going unused. So, that's my issue. But if the price skyrocketed up tomorrow and all of a sudden it was 3 times as much, I wouldn't feel like somehow I was cheated.
Yeah, and I think, like, I've been wanting a SCAR 17 for a long time. I've actually wanted a SCAR 16 and a SCAR 17 for a long time. And if I got a 16, I would actually get rid of my AR-15 and replace it. I like them. I think they're really neat guns, and I think they've done a lot to modernize them. I don't think that, to me personally, they're not worth the 3,000 plus price tag that people have been getting for the gun. But and it's the same. But I was actually right before the hysteria started. The price was actually coming down to the point where it was getting pretty close to the point at which I was like willing to buy one. And seriously, it was probably about a week before the hysteria started. That was the last time I was really looking at them going, oh, wow, that price, there's a few of them on Gunbroker that are actually getting pretty close to the price I'm willing to pay for one. Still more than I'd like to pay, but it is the price I'd be willing to pay. And now they're up to, I think you can get into a new SCAR 17 for about $4,000. And I think you were saying that somebody at Texas Gun Talk or something sold one for, what was it, like $6,000?
Yeah, $6,000 somebody bought one. I mean, it is amazing what people will do to buy one now. And again, it goes back to that whole, I think that guy was an idiot. I think he overpaid for something, but maybe he needed it or wanted it right that very minute. And he was able to do a transaction and get it, and good for him. Not something I would do.
Well, and I think for that person, the option of never being able, the potential option of never ever being able to get one again, if any of this stuff really goes through, was worth $6,000 to fix that pain.
Exactly.
I mean, if I had crazy money, I might have done it too. I might have bought a whole bunch of scars for $4,000. Within the last.
I will say, if I were getting into the gun purchasing world today, and I didn't own an AR, and I didn't own a hunting rifle, and I didn't own, and nobody attacked me for not calling an AR a hunting rifle. I'm just not getting specific with the
stylistically speaking.
Yeah, I'm just saying stylistically, it's wood furniture and all that stuff. If I didn't have those things, then I will tell you, I wouldn't go try to find an AR or a SCAR right now. If I were getting into prep right now and I felt like I needed to own a rifle of some kind, I would probably go for either a 30-30 lever gun or something like that for a 30 cal. If I wanted a handgun caliber, I'd either do 357 or 44 mag. In the handgun world, I haven't seen prices change dramatically in the handgun world. So, that's something I don't think you'd be too impacted with.
Availability has really suffered on most handguns. The one handgun round that I have seen that has not suffered as badly is 357 SIG, which is good for me, but not for many other people.
Right.
Which is part of the reason why it's still around. And that speaks to a point we're going to make in a little while. But, and I think it's interesting. I did some quick searches before the show just to see what has the hysteria done to internet searches? Like, how many people are actually out there looking? And I think it was really interesting. It was, in most instances, and this won't be a big surprise, but in most instances, searches for like major ammo calibers have doubled or even tripled. But funny, that's also included ammo boxes, which I didn't even really think of beforehand. And I've been meaning lately, like, I need to buy some more ammo, some of the military metal ammo boxes. But apparently it's doubled for ammo boxes too, which makes sense because if all these people are out there buying all this ammo thinking it's going to go away, well, they need a good way to store it. So something to be aware of. Anything to do with reloading, for the most part, has doubled or tripled in the amount of searches that people are doing on the internet looking to buy stuff. Bulk ammo searches have tripled or quadrupled in the last month or so. The things that have definitely tripled has been people looking for 223 and 9mm ammo. Interestingly enough, 9mm searches have been kind of in the 100,000 K plus range, whereas 40 caliber has been in the 12,000 plus range of searches, which means that's how many searches were conducted in the last month. In a very kind of general sense, it's not worth really going into how all that works or exactly the finer details of that. But it is interesting.
It's interesting that you found that, because I will tell you just anecdotally, I've been in 2 gun stores in the last month. Don't even ask why. It had nothing to do with me, or not me purchasing, at least. It was friends. But in those gun stores, I just randomly looked at the ammunition they had in stock, and neither one in the last month had any 9mm. And when asked about it, they weren't expecting it anytime soon. On the other hand, both gun stores had 40 in stock.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not a fan of 40 or any of these, what I would call odd calibers, but in this case, it's available.
Yeah, I ran into the same thing with the first ammo shortage when Obama first got elected. Like, I could find 357 SIG when couldn't find hardly anything else.
Right. I
had no problem with it. But it helps that I actually really like the caliber. I like the performance. I like the way it feels. I like how I interact with it personally. So for me, it makes sense. If for you it doesn't make sense, then by all means don't do it. That's more for me. But yeah, 40, and even when I was looking at SG ammo.com before the show, they had, I don't think they had any 9mm, but they did have I wouldn't say a lot of 40, but they had, they still had like cases of 1,000 rounds of good 40 caliber ammunition. It wasn't cheap, but buying 1,000 rounds of 40 has never been cheap. So, but the prices were still in line. But I thought that was interesting. And I think this kind of looking to the future a little bit, other things that you will see within the next few months, if retailers themselves haven't already started to feel it a little bit, and I'm basing this on, this was the same thing that happened last time we had a less legitimate scare, which was just our current president being elected, is that within about 4 to 6 months of all this purchasing happening of the weapons themselves, you all of a sudden, then you started seeing shortages happening with the accessories, things like optics, quad rails, flash hiders, bags, all that stuff. And you also saw like all the guys I know that have and teach firearms, or all the guys I know that do firearms training, all of them said like their classes were full for months. Well, yeah. Because now all these people had all this stuff, and it was like, oh, well, I should probably learn how to use it. Or they felt that they would need to use it. I don't really know what the rationale was there, but I think that was interesting, and that's something else to see coming in the future. So if those are things that you're thinking about and maybe you've been putting them off, it'll probably be a short-lived bump, but it is a bump to be aware of that's coming with all the extra Gucci's, as it were, for our toys.
But I mean, here's the thing about this. I don't think this is going to last forever. I think a lot of these things will die down. We can all have lots of forecasting on what will and will not pass. But at the end of the day, as far as availability goes, I don't think this is going to go away anytime soon. I mean, I think we're going to see these types of availability issues for a while. So if you see something you need or think you need at a price you're willing to pay, don't make the assumption, well, if I just wait another month, it's going to come down in price. You've got, on the gun side, you've got manufacturers going full steam just to meet distributor demand. Some of the manufacturers are now, so the distributors have a 1-year backlog. Some of the manufacturers have now come out with 1 to 2 year backlogs in their ordering. Now, a lot of that will come down once things settle. But even if you assume it's a 6-month backlog, that means 6 months till you see normalization. Same thing with ammunition. The ammunition manufacturers, guys like Hornady and Federal and Winchester, are all in full tilt production right now, and they cannot keep up with demand. The distributors can't keep up with demand. There's huge waiting periods. It's going to take months to get those guys back to normal, even once everything normalizes from a cultural point of view. So once like people start normalizing, it'll take months for the actual sales and prices to normalize again. And you may see, just like last time, the prices will not return all the way back down to baseline. So last time all this happened, ARs went from $600 to $2,000. And when they came back down, they were like $800. This time we're going to see them go from $800 to $2,400. And when they come back down, they may not get back down to $800 again, because the market has shown that it's willing to pay slightly higher prices. So keep all that in mind when you are looking at things.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the only other possibility, and I don't mention this as giving you an excuse to wait, unless you need an excuse, and you just and the honest truth is that you cannot afford to get into whatever it is that you want, which is that we are at the beginning of a presidency, or another term of a presidency, for somebody who is very clearly not interested in the Second Amendment staying around.
Yep.
And so even if this blows over and nothing happens, people are freaked out. Something is going to be tried again. And this is going to keep happening for at least the rest of this presidency.
Yep.
Then what's going to happen?
I agree with that.
Yeah. And then I think then what's going to happen is we're going to get out of it. And no matter who gets elected next, people are, for the most part, going to stay freaked out for a little while.
Yeah, it's going to take months once things calm down in order for things to normalize. And that's why I'm not putting a date on when I think things are going to calm down either. The other But this leads really nicely into our conversation about alternatives.
One thing that I have noticed since I've been kind of watching all these websites and really looking at things is it is the calibers that you never thought of before that are perfectly good calibers. They're just not the most standard calibers. That's what's actually available. And the best example of this is 243. 243 is, I've never even really paid much attention to 243. I knew it was a pretty good, most people just use it for deer. It's a little more powerful than a traditional like 223, 556, less powerful than a 308. It kind of sits somewhere in between. I think Jason McConnell was joking around yesterday when he and I were talking about it. He goes, yeah, growing up, that was always the chicks hunting gun. But it's actually seems like after reading the ballistics and everything, and it's a good round. It's actually pretty plentiful right now, and it's pretty easy to find. And there are some relatively inexpensive rifles that shoot it. Now, obviously, I think to back up for just a second, you can even find 240. You can even find AR platforms that shoot 243.
Yeah,
and it's not price wise, it's about right in between a 308 and a 223 556 as far as cost. It's got a nice flat trajectory. It hits with a little more power than a 556, or a fair amount more power than 556. And there's been a common concept within the survivalist community as a whole that buying standard ammunition is the way to go, because if we run into some collapse tomorrow, that Titawaki happens, into the world as we know it, that there'll be, since 9mm, just to pick one of the standard calibers, that 9mm will be around because everybody's got a gun for it and everybody's using it. But I think there is a flip side to that most people don't ever think about, which is actually what we're seeing right now. Yes, everybody has 9mm. There was lots of 9mm around, but guess what? Since there are a lot of people that have 9mm, there's a lot of people that want and are using up 9mm. So if you have any disruption in supply whatsoever because of a spike in purchasing or because whatever, pick a reason, then that standard caliber now becomes a bit of an albatross around your neck, because you are fighting in the market for a limited resource that has now gone way up. So Titawaki happens tomorrow. Yeah, everybody's going to want 9mm. And it's going to be like 40. A lot of people have gone over to 40. A lot of people are going to want that. 45.
There is an interesting thing to add, though. One of the things you and I said a long time ago, well, I mean, even if you tried to find the show, I'll bet you can't.
Is this going to be about NATO?
Was the idea of when you purchase ammo, and I think even in this discussion, it should be something you can find in a feed store. And if you were driving through West Texas and you went into a feed store, what would you find? 243 actually is one of the ammunitions you'd find.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with 270, and the same thing with 3030. One of the things you mentioned before, and I think it was before the show, was that 3030 searches haven't really increased either. Well, 3030 is an amazing 30 caliber round. It is the most plentiful hunting rifle in America. It is extremely efficient. The lever action rifle is an extremely efficient rifle. It's an extremely usable lightweight rifle. And it is a very good defensive rifle as well, and offensive if need be. So in that realm, it's not so much that we're telling you to go with really bizarre calibers. Like, I'm not telling you go with like the 458 lot, something like that. I mean, because that is, even in times of plenty, the 458 lot isn't, it's always available. It's just very hard to find. But the 3030, I have not, I was in Cabela's actually pretty recently as part of my 2-gun store experience. I do not recommend going into a gun store right now, by the way. They're depressing places. Empty. The people who work there and the owners are very happy, but everybody else very depressed. But 3030 was available in both gun stores as well. Cabela's actually had entire shelves of it in all types of grain, for all purpose. They had the Hornady Leverlution version of it. So 30-30 is something that you can find. Same thing with 44 mag. I have not been able to find it. It's always expensive, whether you're in times of plenty or not. And when I say expensive, it's more expensive than 9mm. But it's not crazy. It is available. My 9mm is my gun of choice for a lot of things, but I am a big fan of the 45. And as Aaron knows, I like my 1911. I've actually been able to find 45 ammo pretty regularly these days. The ones that are the hardest to find right now, from what I can tell, and through my own personal non-scientific research, is 9mm, 5.56, and 308.
Yeah, 308's nothing is as bad right now as 223, 5.56.
Yeah.
9mm is a close second, and it is pretty bad.
Yeah.
40 is kind of a third, but it's still, you can find it. 45 is not quite as bad. I think with the last ammo scare, a lot of people moved away from the 45 because it was already a more expensive round to begin with.
Yep.
And 45 did get affected pretty badly last time. So I think a lot of people moved away from it, or at least they didn't necessarily move away from it, but they bought a 9mm. They bought something that they could use that was effective and easier to find ammo for, and a lot less expensive. I know a lot of people, but personally, were just like, yeah, I put it away in my safe, and I bought a different gun altogether.
I'm going to say something completely crazy that you're not going to hear from other gun guys, or you might hear from some, but not very many. If I were looking right now, and I mentioned a little while ago, but I'm going to give you all my reasons right now, just sum it up. If I were looking right now and I didn't own an AR and I wanted some kind of a rifle like that, I really would go with 30-30. And there's multiple reasons, one of which is ammo is plentiful and available, and it was available last time too. My thinking for the reason why ammo is always available for the 30-30 is 30-30 owners don't feel threatened. They just don't. Nobody has ever threatened to come and take away their 30-30s or their ammunition. It's just, and whether that's a psychological thing or reality, we could all argue. I think it's just a silly way of thinking. I think when people come after guns, they come after them all. But the 30-30 owners in general, I think, feel more secure. The other part of it is 30-30 is just being one of the most popular hunting rounds. There's been decades of people buying the ammo, owning it, tons of reloading equipment for it. I mean, it is just so available and out there that it's just to dry up the supply that's currently in the market would be very difficult. The other thing is, the nice part about the 30-30, and if I were looking today, is it's a non-threatening rifle when it comes to your anti-gun acquaintances. Nobody looks at a 30-30 lever gun and thinks, wow, that's a mean-looking gun. They look at it and they have fond memories of childhood cowboy movies. They look at it and they have fond thoughts of how the West was won. Nobody looks at it for what it is, which is one of the first true assault weapons.
Well, now, I want to stop you for just a second there, because Mossberg does actually have a tactical 30-30 lever action rifle.
And I'm going to even jump out there and say, don't buy it. Okay? Just don't buy it. Whoever you are out there thinking about it, don't do it. Get yourself, my two recommendations, Winchester and Marlin. The Marlin is a great price, and they make a fantastic, I think it's the 336.
Yeah, it is that's the one I keep looking at.
It is a fantastic lever gun. Personally, I like the Winchester, not for anything but emotional reasons. I just like the way it holds, and it's those fond memories of John Wayne, okay?
Are you going to buy the John Wayne commemorative one?
No, I will not get a commemorative one. I refuse.
God, they're ugly.
They are ugly. But to me, it's both of those. I like the wood furniture on them. I like the idea that I like with the Marlin that you can get the stainless steel. That's actually really nice.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the reasons why I like the Marlin.
Yeah, no, they're great. And to me, though, if I were looking right now and I was getting into prep, so again, to our listeners who have only in the last few months maybe been thinking about it, they never got the chance to buy that AR or that FAL or whatever that rifle that they wanted was. Take a real long consideration for a lever action 30-30. It's a very versatile round. There's pretty much nothing in North America you can't take down with it. And, you know, like that's probably true of most weapons. There's probably nothing in North America you can't take down with a 22 with the right shot. But the 30-30 is a very versatile weapon. Very good. It like Aaron pointed out, there are tactical versions of it because actually there are SWAT teams in the U.S. that have actually chosen to use those for close quarters sweeping of homes and buildings and things like that. Because again, lots of different loads for 30-30 are available. So take a look at it, and it's available. It's out there.
The detractors will say, well, it doesn't have the range of 308 or whatnot. And I think to those people, I would say most people have a hard enough time shooting past 100 yards anyway.
Yeah.
30-30 is just fine out to 300 yards, and that's beyond the capabilities of most people to shoot accurately in the first place.
Exactly. And there have been people hunting with that rifle at ranges far greater than people hunt today. So historically, actually, Americans have hunted at longer ranges than they do these days. The average hunting shot is taken in under 150 yards today. Even with all the modern scopes and technology, we don't take long shots anymore because people are into using blinds and things like that. The lever gun was designed for, well, not designed for this specifically, but it became very good at stalking and taking even longer shots in mountainous areas or through large plains. It is a great versatile rifle, and like Aaron said, it'll take a shot out to 300 and drop an animal. And yes, you can argue with us, but there's plenty of ballistic reports out there that tell us that it's more than capable of that, including a lot of anecdotal reports. But even if you wanted to argue that it's only good out to 200 yards, that's still plenty.
And if you can't tell, we have become quite literally fanboys of the 30-30 and the lever action rifles. And I think in part, one of the main reasons I choose the Marlin is just because we have enough stuff that's matchy-matchy, and I don't need to match you any more than we already do. And I think the other reason is I like the stainless steel, and I don't like the commemorative stuff with the Marlin. But I think to kind of wrap up our obsession with the lever action rifle, which actually we did promise a couple episodes back we were going to have at least a segment of a show on our obsession with lever action rifles. But I think the other advantages are that the mechanism is very old. It's very well. It's been refined over the years very well. It's very robust. It doesn't have as many moving parts and as delicate of parts as most semi-automatic rifles that you're going to run into. It's a very robust, very rugged gun. It's relatively lightweight. They can hold a lot of rounds. It's a pretty darn good prepper's gun. I mean, it's a great gun just in general for hunting or whatever. I don't know that I'd really want to use one for home defense. Just, I don't know how loud that would really be. But yeah, maybe. But it is a really good round. But I think going back to getting off our obsession with lever action rifles for just a second, who knows, we may come back to it. But going back to talking about like the searches that were run and what you and I were talking about a long time ago of, pick the stuff that you can find in a feed store. And the interesting thing is the internet searches that are being conducted right now, if you look at those traditional feed store rounds, those are the rounds that are either not being affected. You're not seeing an uptick in web searches for people looking to buy it, or it's only very slightly elevated. And so like 30-06 is very easy to find. I found that in some sporting goods stores recently. Like a whole bunch of boxes with it. I think I went with Jason McConnell I think I was there with Jason. I don't know. I think it was there with him. And they had boxes and boxes and boxes of 30-06 in like every fashion you can imagine. Every grain count, everything. Just all over it. 30-30, 270, 243. I mean, these are rounds they're not weird rounds. They're just rounds that aren't as standard for defensive purposes, I think, is probably why we don't usually think of them. Because let's face it, most of the time when we're, as preppers, talking about firearms, most of the firearms we're talking about are defensive weapons. And these are not typical defensive calibers. But that's not to say they couldn't very easily be used as such. And I think to talk about price for a second, you can pick up some really, really nice rifles. Like the Marlin and the Winchester that you and I were talking about, unless you start getting into like the commemorative stuff,
Right.
you can pick up. I want to say most of the Marlins and Winchesters are under $700 for like
well,
like
the Marlins are
versions.
definitely under 700, and the Winchesters are under $1,000.
Yeah, and I mean I've seen them on Gunbroker for lightly used in very good condition for $400 or $500.
Yeah, and the prices I'm throwing out there are brand new. So brand new from the manufacturer, you're to under $1,000 for the Winchesters and under $700 for the stainless steel Marlin. If you're willing to go with the carbon steel, and it's very nice. Nothing's going to happen to it. Keep it clean, all that, just standard like you would any other gun, and you can get them for about $450.
Yeah, and I think going into shotguns, this is the same thing. This is a feed store round. The 20 gauge has had absolutely no effect in internet searches. Like nobody's looking for it. The shenanigans that are going on have not affected how people are looking at the 20 gauge. And the 20 gauge is an exceptional home defense round. And in most instances, you're better off with a 20 gauge than you are a 12. If you can handle a 12 gauge well, you will handle a 20 gauge exceptionally. And it's the ammo's a little bit cheaper, and it's another one that is super plentiful. I was in the store going through the websites. I don't have any problem finding good 20 gauge ammo that is in what would be good to use for defensive purposes. And in a lot of cases, the same thing can be said about 12 gauge. Like I was looking at cases of 12 gauge the other day. I was looking at prices for Jason McConnell, and the prices have not changed at all. Availability, super easy. You can buy 250 round case of 12 gauge double aught buck off of like SG Ammo and Ammo to Go. I want to say $170, $180.
Wow, that's not bad at all. It maybe slightly changed, but not significantly.
No, I mean you're maybe talking about $5 or $10 more than it was a year ago.
Right.
And that could just be normal inflation, or that could be purely the effect of most of the ammo manufacturers are probably focusing more on the rounds that are kind of beating them up, so to speak, lately.
Very much so. And bear in mind, the cost of materials for a lot of this stuff has gone up. So
yeah,
you will see some of that reflected in the prices.
Yeah, and I think that's very true. And I think, going back to this long held concept, and even kind of the idea, because I know where some of it comes from, because you see the forum warriors, not our forum, of course, because our forum, our guys are good. But you go on some other forums, and you'll see, well, I'll be picking up 9mm off dead NATO soldiers, and it's like, really? What do you think is coming exactly? I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you, and if you really can't tell me, then all right, fine, I'll listen. Even if it sounds completely bananas, I'll listen, because, well, that's who I am. I'll listen to anything just about. And even if we
for the story,
just for the story,
even if just for the story,
hey, it could be funny bar conversation later. You never know. I mean, it could be like that time with the horse. You know what I'm talking about. I mean, it was just bananas. Or the guy's grandmother. That was crazy too. But to be serious again, I don't even know where I was anymore. Oh yeah, so dead NATO soldiers. First of all, give me a break. Second of all, I think these last two shortages have really shown that in times where, whether we're talking about it's an upset in supply because something's happening with laws, or it's an upset in supply because the end of the world as we know it comes tomorrow and supply is essentially shut off or extremely limited. In both instances, these calibers that we just talked about didn't see a single problem.
Right. Now, I will tell you, this is the only thing that I'll say a little bit different to that, because I happen to agree with everything we said. But the areas where having consistent calibers is important is, for instance, I know that for certain calibers, Aaron has potentially a large stock of it, and he knows that I have a large stock of it, and we share that caliber. And therefore, we both know that between the two of us and some other friends, we may have a very large stock of it. So it makes it a little bit easier for planning out the bigger prep scenarios when you know that you've got consistency amongst the people you're prepping with.
The only thing I would guard against in thinking about that is if it's a caliber that everybody, because a lot of people in prep will also talk about that of, what caliber should my friends and I kind of center on. And I think the best answer for that is buy what you like, buy what you shoot well with, buy what you can afford, and you can more importantly what you can afford to practice with. Not like in this exact moment of climate, since ammo is kind of hard to come by for most things. But and if it happens to match up, that if we're talking about like a 3-gun battery or something, and if that caliber happens to match up, or it's close enough that everybody agrees on it, then fine. So I think that would be the only caveat, is not to become obsessed too much with having the same thing your friends have. But it is at the same time, it is good. Like Jason has a 12 gauge. I have a 12 gauge, and Jason has a different kind of 12 gauge than I do. And for Jason, 12 gauge is his very primary thing. For me, it's kind of secondary. I have it for home defense and everything else. But to me, it is not my primary gun of interest. If Peelwaukee happens tomorrow, then that's the only context I'm talking about this in. So that is a shared thing. So that is actually something that I may suck upon a little more normal. And that is a matter of convenience. And also because, Jason doesn't always organize and buy as much ammo. So sometimes when I buy a little for me and a little for him, and just say, all right, well, zombies come tomorrow. I know that Jason has 12 gauge ammo.
Right.
Because he spent it on women and wine. No, I'm kidding. But I mean, that is something to consider. And that one piece right there does actually speak to knowing the people that are in your network and knowing not only their pluses, but some of their minuses too, so that you can work around them or work with them, so that you're not trying to work through them necessarily. When you know full good and well, you ain't going to change that. But I think to move on, and I think one of the points that you brought up in this list, Jonathan, that I thought was good, which is budgeting for last minute decisions. Right.
Yeah, and I mean, part of that was the whole idea that you can't always know what's going to happen next. So you kind of have to plan for it that way in your budget a little bit. And part of that is spreading out your decision to stock up on something, whether it be toilet paper, ammunition, parts for if you do have an AR. Even parts for the ARs are hard to find right now. So, spreading out your costs over long periods of time, but also budgeting for times when things go a little crazy.
Yeah, and I think even budgeting in a sense that if it's something you're not prepared to do today for whatever reason, and we're not talking about firearms necessarily, we're talking about anything. If for whatever reason you're holding off on that purchase, then you should have reasonable expectations that you'll need to budget for that. There could be some sort of supply chain interruption in whatever it is that you're holding off on buying. So maybe you might think about budgeting a little more than you were expecting, so that if something does go sideways, you would be able to afford to get whatever that thing is.
You got to make sure you don't break the bank, because the critical stuff, like we always talk about, is the day-to-day. And you got to make sure that you don't blow through your day-to-day what-if budget, like the losing a job or the loved one passing or something like that. And at the same time, having enough to cover some of the fluctuations that happen in the market like this. I mean, we know, I think, Aaron, we may not have known exactly what was going to cause it or the timing, but we knew that there was going to be a second-term spike in gun prices and ammunition prices.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll tell a personal story. I have purchased a rifle recently. I won't go into too much details about it, but I did purchase one recently, and it is a rifle that for a long time I've looked at and just said, I don't really need it. I want it. I don't want it super bad, but I do want it. And so in a lot of ways, I had a little slush fund that was heavier slush fund than necessarily any of the real toys that I was looking at or considering really was worth. But at the same time, I wasn't really prepared to purchase. Well, now we are in an instance where it's like, okay, that really could go away. I am going to pay. I was quick enough with it. And yeah, I paid a little bit of a premium for it, but I was quick enough that I didn't pay like an insane premium for it. But that's how that ended up working. Now, that's not, that doesn't dip into like, let's say, okay, so if you own a home or something right now, you just had to pay property taxes if you're in an area. Well, I can't imagine there's an area that doesn't have property taxes, but whether it does or doesn't, you just got done paying some kind of hefty tax. And so that's not like you do something foolish, like say, all right, well, I know I had, this $4,000 set aside to pay taxes, but, I really want that SCAR 17 and it might go away. So I just won't pay the tax, man. I'll go buy that SCAR 17. Yeah, that's not really good logic.
No, that's a bad decision.
I mean, I'm not saying that I wouldn't personally empathize and sympathize with you for buying the SCAR over paying your taxes. But I definitely would fault you a little more than a little for doing something like that, because I mean that's it's these things are irritating and they're annoying and they're a little bit frightening in some instances, but that shouldn't mean that we react to them in a way that jeopardizes things for us in a long term sense, or is just plain foolish. But I think that really speaks to all of this, which is, there's always an answer to whatever issue that we're having. And right now it happens to be that there's ammo shortages, craziness going around with the Second Amendment and stuff. There are always ways to look at things in a slightly different light. There's always ways of finding, maybe it wasn't necessarily the seam that you wanted to go down, but there could be a similar seam that would be a path of less resistance. The example, going back to what we were talking about with calibers earlier, like you may really want 5.56 right now, and you may really want an AR right now, but those are kind of hard to come by, and you're going to pay through the nose for them. Whereas you would have a much easier time going with an AR platform that, while elevated right now, is not elevated to the point of insanity in a caliber like 243. And that's just an example. That doesn't mean that needs to be what you run out and do right now. It's the idea that a good portion of survival in just life in general is always looking for those kind of paths of least resistance. If everybody is doing X, and that's driving the price up of X, or making X undesirable for some reason, well, then maybe it's time to take a step back, stop, and go, well, what does Y look like? And maybe Y is really the direction I should be going in right now. Maybe while everybody's buying ARs and crazy stuff, maybe you're buying a lever action. Maybe you're buying a shotgun. Maybe those are the ammo choices you're making right now, and just saying, you know what, it's not exactly what I wanted to do, but it is a close second, and this is something I can get into, stay within my means, stay within my budget, and stay on track. And it's something I kind of probably should have taken care of anyway.
Right, and that makes sense. It keeps you on a path towards what you need, and maybe you just have to rethink your wants.
I think that's a good point. Rethinking them, reprioritizing, and examining. Is this something I can do without, either forever or for a short period of time, or even a few years necessarily? Because I think most likely after this presidency is over, we will probably see kind of a bit of a swing in the other direction of who's in charge, so to speak. And I think at that point, things will probably calm down. Now, I mean, I'm just kind of pulling stuff out of my butt in this exact moment. I'm not telling you I have a crystal ball and that I know that's what's going to happen, or I feel very strongly about it. It's just kind of my general sense of what I think will probably end up happening. I could be completely off base with it. But, and then in, say 6 years, things calm down and it's easy enough. You get back into it, who knows? Right. It was like with the last assault weapons ban, after 10 years, it was very annoying while it went on, but we all lived through it. And even though we could only have 10 rounds in our handguns, we all lived through it, and we moved forward. And after 10 years, it went away, and then you could, you didn't have to pay $100 or some other insane amount for a handgun magazine that was a pre-ban handgun magazine that had 2 more rounds in it, which I do actually distinctly remember being in a store. And I think at that time I carried a Smith & Wesson 4006, And there was, I think they had 10-round magazines for it, and they had 12-round magazines. The pre-banned 12-round magazines were about $75, I think. They may have even been $100. And now probably not right this minute, but before all this hysteria, you could probably have bought them for $20-25.
Right.
So just things to be aware of, not necessarily be lackadaisical about, but just, think through and make real conscious decisions. Don't make emotionally based decisions. And I don't know about you, John, but I know I've had to do, because I mean, like I've said, I go on these ammo websites, almost every morning, just kicking around, and it never fails. I'll see a case of 308, which is my preferred rifle round, and I'll see a case of 308, and it's like $700 for like a good, like, Hornady tap or something, and I'll think, well, I have that money sitting aside. I could just buy a case of it, or I could even buy 2 cases of it, and then I stop and think, actually, I have enough. I have enough that I feel comfortable, and I'm only thinking about buying it right now because of the hysteria and because 308 doesn't pop up all that often. And you still can find it if you pay close attention and you watch these things. But I think that's the real key is, really stop yourself and think, do I really need this? Am I already good? Or can I choose an alternate option and get out of this situation?
Oh, yeah, it happens all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's every day. I'm sure it's all of us. Do I want this because I need it, or do I want this because I think I might not be able to have it tomorrow?
Yeah. Speaking in very general senses, I mean, this applies to anything. And I think to kind of tell a funny story, years ago, I was considering going to Arizona State University to finish out my architecture degree. And I was dating this girl at the time. And so I drove out to Arizona, and man, it's like a 15-hour, or it's supposed to be an 18-hour drive. I did it in 15. But on the drive out there, I was really using the time to kind of reflect on my life and everything. And I kept coming back to, man, I just need to get rid of this girl. Never really been, she's a lot of fun, but she's never really been good for me. Actually, she's kind of a giant pain in the ass. She's always doing crazy stuff. And I mean, 15 hours in a car thinking about really just, could you think, really working it into my own head that I need to get this girl out of my life and everything. And it's never been good. Same thing on the return trip home. I mean, I'm thinking through what I'm going to say to her, how I'm going to end this. And this will also be a testament for just how bananas she was. I get back and I meet up with her for lunch like the following day. And she's like, I have some news. I'm going to marry so-and-so. I mean, out of left field, I'm like, I didn't even know we were seeing other people. And even though I had already worked myself up that I didn't even want this business anymore, I wanted nothing to do with this. And it was also a moment of extra crazy. All of a sudden I wanted her back. And all of a sudden I'm like, no, we should get married. Thank God that never happened. But there is that mode of sometimes you want things purely because you cannot have them anymore.
Yeah, I think that's the case in a lot of situations, and probably why people end up getting into trouble all the time.
Yeah. And I think this is probably not really a clean segue, but this is a good point to break it off and go into our tinfoil hat section of the show.
Oh, well, yes. I've been wearing mine the whole time because I don't want my brain red.
Your brain is red?
Sometimes.
Okay. All right.
Only when there's a bleed.
That was so random.
Hey, you never know.
So there's some funny stuff going on in the news, but now you've got your conspiracy theory you want to talk about today, or one that maybe you want to allude to.
I'm not sure. Well, here's the thing. And I don't know how much I want to share.
Because we usually stay away from this and try not to be crazy, but today we're having a little fun with it.
Well, we're having a little fun with it, and it's a little freaky. Like, I wasn't the one who thought of this. And I'm not, as many of you who listen, I mean, we're not normally big conspiracy theory nuts, but this one kind of freaked me out a little bit. So for those of you following gun news, you might have noticed that Chris Kyle, the Navy SEAL or ex-Navy SEAL who wrote the book American Sniper, and he also has one of the longest kill shots on record. It's not the longest anymore, but it's one of the longest. And it's pretty impressive at like 1.2 miles. I mean, it's not like it's it's a long shot. And I'm laughing, but not about the situation, just that's a long shot. He was found dead yesterday at a shooting range. And then, in addition to that, Keith Ratliff, who is another big Second Amendment supporter, he does a lot of YouTube videos and such. He was found dead at the beginning of January from a non-self-inflicted gunshot wound to the back of the head. And then, for those of you who also follow gun news, you might have noticed that, and I'm probably pronouncing his name slightly wrong, but John Novosek or Novosecki, he was found, he died in a mysterious, and that's the media who said mysterious, car crash on January 4th. All these guys under 40, all of them big pro-Second Amendment guys, very, very public pro-Second Amendment guys, and very big amongst social media and such. Just kind of a little coincidental that they all die within 1 month. These aren't exactly guys who are like in their 80s who you'd expect are just passing and you know, shit happens. And it's all mysterious circumstances. So Chris Kyle was shot at point blank range at a gun range by a guy he was helping out. Keith Ratliff, again, shot in the back of the head mysteriously, and John Novosecki in a very random car crash on a not very dangerous section of road.
Well, now, Ratcliffe in particular, I think, was interesting in that I think it's Ratcliffe was the right one that you were saying Ratcliffe, that he was actually found shot in the back of the head, sitting in a room full of weapons, and nothing had been disturbed. Yes. And there was no sign of struggle.
No sign of struggle.
Yeah.
No sign of struggle. Or the Navy SEAL who shot by somebody at point blank range. He's a trained Navy SEAL, and he was there with another buddy of his who was also shot. No defensive wounds or anything like that. I mean, SEAL Team 3, combat sniper, had seen time in Afghanistan and Iraq. And then John Novosecki, you know, his is a little different, but very mysterious car crash. And he's very well known for his rifles. He makes very high-end precision rifle, or made high-end precision rifles. So, just very interesting, and it's you know, it almost makes me a little worried to do the podcast. You know, might have to hide in my bunker for a little while or something, if I had a bunker.
We'd have to build one first. We'd have to build it because we don't have one.
No, don't have one. Not anywhere, nowhere.
No, don't know what you're talking about. Speaking of conspiracy theories,
I'm leaving this tinfoil hat on for days.
You should tighten it down a little bit.
Are you kidding? I've got a brim on it.
I think that brain bleed is getting a little loose, and I think that to walk
pyramid shaped, just in case.
I hear that keeps needles sharper or something. I don't know. I did watch it.
I'm going to take it off for a second. Yeah, all this stuff sounds. You know, you can make a conspiracy out of anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you and I agree that, you know, sometimes it's hard to not look at things and see meaning and conspiracy in it, but it's really hard to create a conspiracy, like a real one.
Yeah. Well, it requires a lot of dedication. A lot of people have to be in on it. It has to be. Nobody can ever talk about it ever again.
Yeah.
Not to say that kind of stuff doesn't ever happen successfully. I mean, we have a very large espionage community that I'm sure carries off a lot of things very successfully that no one ever really knows about and is never really spoken of again. But, you know, there was an interesting study done by a woman at UT, and I wish I could remember her name. There was a thing on the Discovery Channel about her recently, and she was talking about why human beings see patterns in things where patterns do not exist. And it was rather interesting. And the short version was, if you give somebody a test of 10 questions that they can answer relatively easily, and this is the control group I'm starting with, and then you sit them in front of a TV showing nothing but static and ask them to pick out images they see in the static. For the most part, no one really sees anything but static. Here's an interesting thing. Change that a little bit. Give people 10 questions that causes them a lot of stress, that they can't possibly answer correctly, and that they are aware that they cannot answer correctly, so causing lots of stress. Then you show them a picture of static, like static on a television. all of a sudden, like, I want to say it was like 95 or 97% people start to see patterns in that picture. The takeaway from that is, under stressful situations, under situations of concern, of situations where we not quite our best self, we will automatically start to see patterns where there are not. That doesn't, and I guess going back to what the story John was telling, that doesn't mean that we're saying they're not there. What we're doing is offering you a different perspective to say, take a deep breath, step back for a second, think it through logically. Does it really make sense? Is there really something cohesive? You've got people like Alex Jones out there who, quite frankly, make the rest of us look completely batshit crazy and do almost nothing to move forward a message where sometimes there is actually some truth that should be getting out, but it's being told in such a frickin' bananas way that no one wants to listen to it or is willing to listen to it, and can very quickly write you off as being nuts. I really do believe that, and I know we have some listeners that do listen to Alex Jones, and you know what? I do look in on some stuff from time to time, but I always do it and just cringe and go, God, this guy is kind of he's associated with Second Amendment. He's associated in a lot of instances with preppers, and I'm just like, the guy just makes all of us look like a complete raging idiots.
Yes.
Which is sad, because he is actually an intelligent man.
It's tough because, I think even we would follow, so no tinfoil hat or not, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean nobody's following you.
True.
It's the same idea here. I mean, just because these conspiracy theories aren't true doesn't mean somebody isn't trying to, take away the Second Amendment or make it mean something it doesn't, and all those things. So we're not saying don't worry about anything. What we're saying is there are right ways and wrong ways to use your frustration and stress.
And there's always a right way and a wrong way to go about looking at information and analyzing that information, and always realize that there are other possible answers and that you really should consider them before you decide to really go down any one particular path. That's not always time efficient necessarily, but it is important, because otherwise you can very easily end up going down the wrong rabbit hole. Banana stuff, that might be the wrong rabbit hole. But all things should be considered, even the stuff that is banana. And we'll go into another one here where we were just talking about this on the In the Rabbit Hole fireside chats, which, if you don't know what that is, I will explain after we get done with all of this, because it's a really cool new development. And this actually, Alex Jones was reporting on this a year ago or 2 years ago, that the Army was conducting training exercises in small towns across America, and they were really kind of doing it in a very bizarre way. So first, they were doing these training exercises, helicopters, men in black, not the suit, but like the body armor. I don't know if they were using blanks or if they were using simunition or what that was, but essentially, for all intents and purposes, if you were a civilian standing outside of this, basically, you're thinking the U.S. Army has just declared war on some building that you're looking at. Really quite terrifying. I mean, I'm not ashamed to admit that. If I saw that happening in front of me, I would be like, holy crap, how the hell do I get out of here? Where's the exit? I'm not getting involved in this monkey business.
All that prepping just came in handy.
Exactly. Because you know what the number one rule of prepping and survival is staying alive. So, but the interesting, it was just a training mission. They hadn't. The weird part is they hadn't informed any of the local authorities. The local authorities were kind of a little freaked out, as well as the civilian population, and they showed up. And this happened in a bunch of places. And then, but really, it had been primarily kept to more rural, small town areas. And for some reason, recently, the U.S. Army has decided to start doing it in kind of major metropolitan areas, like Houston, where I am, and Miami. And I think they were going to do it in Galveston, but this was funny. So in Houston, they hadn't alerted anybody, and people were calling in, freaking out, and ambulances were being sent, and fire trucks were being sent in. Nobody knew what was going on, and the Army was like, "Oh, hey, relax. We're just doing a thing over here. We're just doing some training, just some urban warfare stuff. Don't mind us." y'all should go away. And then the same thing in Miami. Somehow the word got out that they were going to do it in Galveston. I think what I read was that they did actually alert the local authorities that they would be doing it. The authorities then alerted the media to let people know not to get freaked out about it. The Army got mad about it and then canceled that training mission because, well, now people know about it, so we're not going to do it. The whole thing is very... Now, obviously, you can take it down that the U.S. Army is preparing for civil unrest and all this stuff, or you can just look at it and think, wow, whoever is in the communications or PR department at the Army that is involved in this stuff is doing a really shitty job of keeping people from freaking out, which these people,
not their job.
Yeah, exactly. Which these people should be doing, which is like, it's kind of a pointless thing to freak people out for no apparent reason, which everyone would be freaked out if all of a sudden black helicopters are coming in and men in black body armor, basically U.S. Army starts attacking the vacant building next to you. You might be a little freaked out. I don't care who you are. And so it's kind of nonsensical, and there are several different ways of looking at it. One, it's just really bad practices of the U.S. Army, who is trying to train for urban warfare in these far-off places that we send them to. The other flip side of that is the more Alex Jones end of things, which is that they're preparing for civil unrest here. And that's really what I mean by, examining X and Y. The initial value is to look at X. This is scary. I need to be concerned about. That is human nature. That's what keeps us from getting ourselves killed. All the way back to, wait a minute, is that a saber-toothed tiger over there about to bite my head off? Or is it just, the wind blowing around some brush off in the distance or something? Our first instance is that danger? Do I need to identify it? What do I need to do about it? Is it trying to kill me? And so that is our immediate reaction. And once we've cleared that, which in a lot of this stuff, a lot of people have a hard time getting past the notion of, okay, it wasn't a saber-toothed tiger. It is just the bushes wrestling. I can go on about my business without being freaked out and stressed out. And in both instances, I don't think you or I, John, are actually advocating to make a decision one way or the other about the stuff that we just talked about. Those are really just examples.
I think we just push or at least from my perspective, don't overreact. Yes, there may be things linking things. Sometimes there really are coincidences in the world, and anybody who believes there's no such thing as coincidence is kidding themselves. Bad things happen. Good things happen. They're not always linked together because of some giant-sized conspiracy. But at the end of the day, like I said, I think it's all about being diligent and understanding how certain things impact you, and not necessarily trying to figure out how everything's linked and how, people are out to get you.
Sure. And, as you said earlier, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean somebody's not watching you. So there could be validity, but it's just, balance. Pay attention. Don't fly off the handle as easily as maybe sometimes it is for those of us that are concerned with our state. Are a little more vigilant and hyper aware than people that are asleep and not paying attention and taking responsibility for their own. That we wrap up episode 96. Thank you for joining us today. And yes, I did almost forget to mention what the fireside chats are. And they are every Monday. A group of us from the forum get together on a Google Hangout, and that includes both video and just text chat. And we get together, we pick a topic, and we chat about it. Obviously, a survival topic. And I am making an effort to be there every Monday. I know Jonathan is also making an effort to join in as many as he can. But even if we're not there, there's some really cool people you get to hang out with and just chat about prep and chat about life and what's going on in the news and whatever you like. And it is obviously a video chat, but you can join in and just be part of the text chat. Or you can just kind of sit back with your video turned off and listen and hang out and see what goes on. If you'd like to get involved, go to the forum and look for the section on Fireside Meetup. And I think you'll really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. They've been very productive and very entertaining conversations so far. And it's just a great way to meet other people in the community. Are you part of the solution? Spread the word about preparedness by reviewing In the Rabbit Hole on iTunes. It doesn't just let us know how we're doing, it also tells others the show is worth listening to. Review us today on iTunes. From the Lone Star State, till next time, stay safe and sound.